Welcome, everybody, to the special meeting of the Holyoke School Committee. It is June 9th, and it is calling this meeting to order at 5:06. Roll call, please.
Mayor Garcia,
Here.
Dr. Rivera Colon,
Here.
and Ms. LaFave, Ms. LeBron Martinez, Ms. Tensley Williams, Mr. Saza,
Here.
Mr. Willihan,
Here.
Mr. Collmore, Ms. Wilson. Present.
Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Public. One nation. God. Liberty. Justice for all.
In March 29, 2025, Governor Healy signed into law bodies to H 62 as amended, which contains the final form of the bill, entitled An Act Relative to Extending Certain COVID-19 Measures Adopted During the State of Emergency, ACT. Of interest to all governmental public bodies in Massachusetts, the Act extends until June 2027 the authority for meetings of multiple member bodies to be held in an entirely remote or hybrid format. All public bodies may hold fully remote or hybrid meetings without the physical presence of a quorum of the public body, as long as adequate alternative means of public access is also provided. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, I'm hereby informing all attendees that a video and audio recording is being made of the meeting, and the meeting is being live streamed and run live on the city's community TV channel. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We have our item on our agenda is interviews for school committee legal counsel. I will give a little bit of a background of how we got here, and then we'll be on our way. Holyoke Public Schools released a request for proposals for legal services on May 5th, 2025, with proposals due by May 22nd, 2025. The request for proposals was emailed to all firms of the Massachusetts Council of School Attorneys. The following four firms submitted proposals: Merrick, Stoneman, Chandler, and Miller, Valerio, Dominello, and Hillman, Norris, Murray, and Peloquin. The school committee appointed an RFP review committee composed of Mr. Devin Sheehan, Mr. Orlando Isaza, Ms. Beth Gage, and Mr. Sean Mangano to evaluate the proposals and recommend firms for interview scheduled for tonight. The RFP review committee met on May 27, 2025 and evaluated four proposals. Thank you so much, review committee. The four members unanimously agreed to invite Merrick and Norris, Murray, and Peloquin to the June 9th meeting tonight to be interviewed. The school committee will interview both firms and vote on a firm during our regular agenda. We have 6 questions to ask, which are randomly assigned to members of the committee. Each interview will be approximately 30 minutes, and I will ask the firm to keep to that time frame. By a random draw, Norris, Murray, and Peloquin will be interviewed first. Understanding that I cannot restrict anyone from a public meeting, I would ask that representatives from Merrick wait in the hall so both firms have equal opportunities with the questions. At the conclusion of the voting tonight, Mr. Mangano will be your primary contact for contracting purposes. I would like to thank all the 4 firms for applying, and we really appreciate our 2 finalists for being here this evening. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, we will begin. Norris, Murray, and Peloquin, please sit next to Ms. Feliciano. All right, since time is of the essence, I will ask each member to introduce themselves very quickly.
Hi, good evening. My name is Melissa Murray. I'm a partner at Norris Murray and Pelican. Thank you for having us. I went to law school as a kind of a second career. I was in nonprofit management for a little while and grant fundraising. Went back to law school, was very interested in labor and employment law. Started as a law clerk with our predecessor firm of Collins, Lockard and Pelican. And at the time, they really needed some help with education law. And my mom is a teacher, now retired, so I was very interested in that. So ultimately, I ended up staying with the firm and going on and becoming one of the owners now. But that marriage between law and education was great for me because my mom, teacher, dad, attorney. So I've really enjoyed it, and it's been a great way to get to stay interested in things that I'm interested in the education world, but also the labor and employment, which is what I went to law school for. So look forward to talking with you more.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brett Sabag. I'm an associate at Norris Murray and Pelican. I've been at the firm for just over 5 years. I started in March of 2020, actually the week before the world shut down. So I always like to remember that, but or throw that out there. But in any way, I've been practicing for over 10 years. I started out of, I went to Suffolk Law School in Boston. I'm originally from the Boston area. I went to Suffolk. I attended the evening division, working full time at the Department of Justice as a law clerk in the immigration court. After that, I was a prosecutor in Essex County for just about 5 years before transitioning over to a staff attorney in the federal government, where I worked with a variety of different issues involving labor and employment and employee discipline and bargaining before joining the firm here. And you know, I've really enjoyed my time at the firm, having grown as a labor and employment attorney and a school attorney. And you know, I enjoy working with my school clients and, you know, the challenges, you know, helping them meet the myriad of challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis. So there's always something new and challenging. So it keeps us on our toes. Thank you. Look forward to talking with you all.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ian Keefe. I also went to Suffolk Law. I graduated at the same time as Melissa. Little different start for me. I started doing criminal defense and some personal injury law. I really like the civil litigation aspect, and I transitioned that over to more of a med mal defense practice just before COVID. And then after COVID, I tried to give that up, and I switched over to municipal law, where I started working for the city of Boston, specifically for their Boston Police Department and Legal Advisor's Office. Worked there for about a year, and then I saw the opening over at Norris Murray and Pelican. I wanted to branch out, also leave the city of Boston, and I've really, in the past about 4.5 years, I've been working with them. Really took a deep dive into school law, collective bargaining, other employment areas of employment law. I really enjoy working with schools and school committees. You know, it's always something new every day, just like Brett had said. You know, I do a lot of investigations, disciplinary actions, employment issues. I look forward to discussing more with you guys tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we have 6 questions that have been assigned, and we'll start with Mr. Sheehan.
Hello, my name is Devin Sheehan. I'm an at-large member of the Hoyok School Committee. I first was elected started serving in 2010, took some time off and joined the school committee of the Greater Commonwealth Virtual Schools, and then came back on the committee last June. So I've had a lot of experience here in school board work, and some other things too, but so
Wait,
what
you can't. You have to say that. Sorry.
I'm also president of the National School Board Association here, so work with many of your partners through COSA. What experience do you have representing public school committees and school districts here in Massachusetts? And please describe your familiarity with Massachusetts education laws, school governance, and any relevant cases or matters you've handled.
Sure. Thank you very much. So in our proposals, you have a list of some of our clients. So we are familiar with working with school committees and school clients in a variety of different ways, and it really depends on what the client is looking for. So it can be from soup to nuts in terms of labor, municipal, general counsel, school. We do special education as well, and student discipline. So we can provide any of the services that you might need as a school client, including, we've done RFQs for like wind turbines if you want to get solar panels put on the roof. We've done those sorts of things. And then we also handle the day-to-day policy review. Principal has a question about a discipline matter, collective bargaining at the table. So that's basically an answer, soup to nuts. We also, in terms of cases that we have handled, there's a number of arbitration cancel cases that we've done that have to do with employee discipline. It can be very hard when there's a teacher that has been in place for a long time, and you need to move them from a system, given the protections that they have, to actually move forward with a termination. It can be hard for everyone involved. So we do a lot of working with our clients to help them document what they need to document, make sure they have given the teacher due process, and then move forward through to that. And then we also have a number of special education cases, and I can let my colleagues answer as well.
Certainly, as Melissa mentioned, our services really range in the spectrum between litigation and state and federal courts. We've litigated Title IX cases in federal court, contract. We had a jury trial in Bristol County Superior Court that we prevailed on, and some contract claims with a paraprofessional. And so I think our firm has the collective litigation experience should we find ourselves at that point, but we're prepared to do that if necessary. But we understand that a lot of times the school committee does not want to be involved in litigation. So as Melissa said, we like to get in on the ground level, especially with investigations, employee discipline cases, to really guide you through the process if you need that. And we do a number of trainings, student discipline. We've done collective bargaining trainings. We've done some special education geared trainings. So we have that experience, and that ranges again from handling cases in state and federal court to the Department of Labor Relations on behalf of school committees with some active unions and really policy reviews. We were also involved with the proposed changes to the vocational admissions regulations. So we were guiding some of our clients through that process as well. But our services really range from day-to-day counseling to policy review, bargaining, really whatever comes up.
Sure, and just to focus just on work with school committees, depending on the school committee, we could work hand in hand with either the vice chair or the executive administrative assistant. Last week I was reviewing the agendas for next week's school committee meetings. We reviewed executive session minutes to kind of make sure those are okay before they get sent out. We work directly with school committees and their subcommittees drafting policies. Currently working on a medication administration policy, a booster club policy. I know that the medication administration policies and the regulations are just being voted, I think, next week. So there are going to be some new updates to that policy as well. I've worked with Springfield School Committee and the Springfield Police Department in drafting a policy for cameras that are outside and inside the school and how that works with the SROs. And again, we're really there for any open meeting law questions that arise during the meeting that'll pop up. We can be there via text or in person if those issues arise.
So hi, I'm next. I'm Ellie Wilson. I'm a Ward 7 school committee member. I am a former teacher in the district. Well, I actually started my career as a paraprofessional and then became a teacher. Thank you. I'm on question 2. How do you approach advising school committees on matters where legal, political, and community considerations intersect? And then I'm going to ask you to share an example of how you helped a school committee navigate a complex or high-profile issue.
Well, I think one of the important things that we try to do when we are giving advice or advising any client, school committee, principal, superintendent, is we look at the legal issue, and then we do try to separate out that political or community issue. So we are here to give you legal advice, and we can tell you and we can discuss with you what the other implications may be. But a lot of that will come down to what the committee wants to, how they want to approach a particular issue. It's our opinion to give you, it's our job to give you the legal advice and to help you see the difference between political and legal questions and problems, and then give you the information that you need to make a sound legal decision. And we can certainly help you. We can, bounce ideas off of each other, but it's not, we need to make sure that you understand what the legal implications are first and foremost, and that's our particular job. And I think Ian actually was talking about it. The video surveillance policy that he was working on in Springfield is a good example of something that was also political and very community involved, but was an important policy for that committee.
Sure, just to expound on that, we worked with not only with the Springfield School Committee, but the Springfield Police Department, and then separately the City of Springfield Legal Department. There were basically 3 or 4 different competing interests, not to mention the community engagement. Community engagement. There were other community groups that were kind of advocating for more transparency, and that was ultimately what we were working on, is putting together a policy that kind of met everyone's needs and addressed everyone's concerns. But obviously, the focus was on the safety of the students, which is why they put the policy in place.
Oh, am I still on here? One example would be one of our clients, as it relates to the vocational admissions changes. There was, DESE, or OCR had, flagged some of the schools in terms of, compliance and some sort of the disparate impact. Are we excluding, certain demographics of schools? And so, that one particular client, came under review by DESE, and as a result, we worked with them on being proactive and changing their admissions policies. I mean, putting aside to whether they should have been in that position, fairly or not, but and that was certainly a high-profile issue in that community with their 3 sending districts. So that's something that we were proud of, that we were able to help them get to a place where they have a new and revised policy that's equitable within the bounds of the law, and is proactive. So
Thank you.
So I'm next. We don't have a lot of money, so what cost-saving measures do you offer or recommend to help school committees manage legal expenses without compromising in the quality of services? Please provide examples such as preventative training, policy review strategies, or billing models that reduce unnecessary costs.
Absolutely. That's a great question. You're not the only one who is either, not an extremely wealthy community or is feeling a lot of pressure these days. So that is something that we really work with our school committee clients on, or in our cities and towns, actually, across the board. So there's a number of different models that you can use for how you use our services. One that most find the best to manage is that there's a point person on our side, at least in the beginning, until we get into like a report, and there's a point person on the school committee or the city manager's side or the town administrator's side. And so most questions will come through that person, or when someone contacts me, I get this little email like, I've checked with the superintendent and it's okay that I email you this question, or the superintendent is copied on an initial email that says like, I'm reaching out to you to discuss this, and Tim knows, or whatever the situation might be. And so that's really good, because a lot of times you can just get emails once you're working with a client quite frequently. You're familiar with the principal as a student services director, and so you start emailing back and forth, and it might be a question that can be answered in-house that's already been asked by a superintendent or another principal. The school committee, someone on the school committee who's been here for a very long time may already know the answer. It might not need to go out to council. So having a person that kind of guides communication, at least until we get into a rhythm, is very important. I have another client who has like a referral form that we have to fill out each time, and that's how they manage it. It comes to me, either one of the department heads or myself send it off, and then it has to be approved, and then we can go forward. So there's a number of different ways we can do it. The other thing that we do, and it was mentioned here, is training. And I think that's really important. So we do a lot of training at the beginning of the year in terms of when you have your orientation for your teachers and your administrators. This summer, I'm doing an orientation retreat for administrators for one of our clients, and we're going over a lot of Title IX stuff, really like getting into Title IX so that they can start the school year off with all of that information ahead of time. School-based investigations training, we have Title IX trainings, we have student discipline trainings, so we can do these for principals, assistant principals, those who are going to be doing the work. And so then if they have an issue come up during the year, and we're already talking the same language because we're using the same templates, we're looking at the same information, we can help guide them through the process instead of having to do the whole process ourselves. So I think that can be really helpful for everyone. And the other thing is we talk to each other. So we share information. So if I've already researched an issue, then, Ian can just email me and I can share that research. So you're not doubling up. We try to share information and resources across clients. And that's why having these trainings are so, we have this training, so it just costs really to update it, maybe put the statistics in there for your district and then provide the training, right? We're not recreating an entire training unless you have something very unique that you need us to do. We're trying to use what we already have in place.
Right, and if say there's a particular issue that comes up, as Melissa said, we do, I think that's one of the valuable parts of our firm is, we do work with a number of other experienced attorneys in school matters and municipal matters who have likely seen that issue or some variation of that issue, and we talk to each other, rather than figuring out internally, what is the best way to, handle a solution, rather than saying, hey, why don't you go research this issue, and that could, sometimes that can lead to unnecessary costs or time, and it's the way that we do our work efficiently to provide the most efficient and timely legal advice to our clients as we can.
Another thing I'll add is that we're very easily accessible, and I think just on the way in, we both had a call from different superintendents. We work directly with superintendents or principals, wherever the matter may need, but we're available. So if an issue does arise where they have to make a quick decision, they can generally reach out to us and get a hold of us within 10, 15 minutes, and we can provide some quick advice that may be able to prevent some long-term legal issues down the road. We try to do a lot of calls on the road, so if we're traveling in between clients, that we're not you're not double billing, so we're saving some time on the travel by also being more efficient with some communications as well. But I think just the direct access that we work directly with principals, superintendents, assistant principals, a lot of different matters, and we try to be accessible at all times, so they can get the quick access and quick information they need to help prevent anything down.
Thank you. Mr. Willihan.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. My name is John Willihan. I'm the Ward 5 member here. I've been here 8 years, and I'm a 35-year-long municipal worker. Okay. Okay, so a little about me. So how would you approach educating and advising newly elected school members? You talked about the teachers and stuff, but what about the members here regarding their legal responsibilities and their roles? Would you provide training such as written resources to support this process?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We certainly can. I know MASC also provides some of those as well, and the Attorney General's office will provide open meeting law, so we can guide you in the right direction where you might be able to get even some free or reduced cost trainings that, are on point. We can provide them ourselves. We provide sometimes a recap on important laws and rules that you need to be aware of, such as the open meeting law at the beginning of certain your annual meeting or your organizational meeting, just to give everyone a recap, especially if you have newly elected members who maybe haven't gone through it in a while. Help remind you that you need to do your conflict of interest training. You have to, all these things that you need to keep up on. So we can absolutely provide that. It really is what you need from us, and I don't mean to keep repeating that, but that's also part of that cost savings, right? If you've just recently gone through a slew of trainings and you are all very knowledgeable on the conflicts of interest or on open meeting law, wouldn't sit here and try to sell you an open meeting law training, because that's not what you need in this moment. But if there's another matter that we can help you with, evaluation, superintendent evaluation, managing contracts, something like that you haven't gotten or you haven't had in a while, we can absolutely do something like that, and would be prepared to do so.
One thing I'll add too is, as new developments come up in law and policy, we do send out a client advisor monthly. So while it's not technically a training, it's just another tool that we as the firm use to keep our clients updated on developments of the law that they may not know about. Just so that's something that if a change does happen, they're aware of it, and if it if they have a question on it, or if there's a little bit of a, or if they need an interpretation of that, we're happy to provide that. So,
I could just add and kind of stress again that we try to make ourselves very accessible. So if anyone has a question, whoever the designated point person is, usually it's the vice chair, wants to reach out with a quick text, hey, we have this issue's coming up. Do I have to do this at the open meeting, or do I, what's the issue with quorum here, or what's the issue with remote participation? Usually it's like, we'll check the policy, but we can check that real quick for you, or do whatever quick analysis. But again, just to stress, the accessibility is kind of our strong point to try to focus on.
Ms. LaFave?
Good evening. Thank you for being here today. My name is Mildred LaFave, and I am the other at-large school committee member. My question is, what is your experience advising school committees on collective bargaining with educators and staff unions? How would you support the committee in understanding its legal role in negotiations, especially as it prepares to re-engage in bargaining responsibilities previously managed under receivership?
It's a good question. It's a good question, and obviously you have a little bit of a unique situation here as you're exiting receivership. So it's a little bit of a new game even for us. But we would advise you, I think, very similar to how we would advise other school committees in terms of what your rights and obligations are with respect to collective bargaining. And then, do you have a subcommittee that then would be part of the negotiation team? I don't know if you've given that any thought, or the last time you've done traditional negotiations, but usually there's one or two members of the school committee that sit on a negotiation team that are actually at the table. And so there's general information for the whole school committee in terms of just their rights, obligations, and how to set priorities and what they're looking at. And then there'll be members that would be oftentimes in these situations, there are members who sit on the negotiations team. And so we would work most closely with those individuals, and then there'd be an information sharing back and forth with updates to the rest of the school committee. But I think in terms of that question that was about the political, the legal, and the community, I think those are that's probably going to come up a lot in terms of your negotiation situation as you're exiting receivership, both from the teachers union making some very political public announcements and getting the community involved. So I think there would be a lot of training on, responding to that or not responding to that, how the committee responds, who a spokesperson is, what type of bargaining we want to have in terms of open, closed, what our priorities are there. So that would be something we could discuss with you as a group, and then get some guidance from you and give you guidance in return, because sometimes something you might want to do might not make the most sense, and then we'd come up with a plan and we'd move forward from there. And it can take a long time. For those who haven't been involved in negotiations, it can take several years sometimes to get a contract done in normal circumstances. So you're going to have unique circumstances. You certainly don't want and hope for a collective bargaining process to span a year or more, but that's something else that we can help prepare you for, what's normal, what's not normal, so that you don't get anxious, because you might get questions from the public. It's been 6 months, why hasn't this settled yet? that's not abnormal. It's okay. You're doing okay. So that's something that we can also help you with.
Just to add, yeah, our firm, whether it's Melissa, myself, Ian, or Tim Norris, one of our other partners, have been involved in collective bargaining in the education setting, sometimes with, contentious, sometimes they turn contentious, we don't, and, we're prepared to handle that. A lot of times the issues come up, in terms of, how many people should be on a bargaining team and whether that implicates open bargaining. And, I think, we've dealt with that issue a number of times and have been in front of the DLR on that. So we certainly have experience, in that aspect in larger communities, as well as some of our vocational schools. I'd also add that, our firm has had experience that I think would translate here. We have negotiated, a first union contract at a lot of schools where, previously the employees had not been unionized. So that can take a bit of a different dynamic. So I think that perspective and having that experience would be helpful to this situation as well.
Mr. Isaza.
Thank you for being here. My name is Orlando Isaza, and I am actually an appointed member of the committee to fill a vacancy to represent Ward 4. The committee's goal is to support a seamless transition between attorneys while minimizing costs associated with the transition. Please describe your firm's transition plan in detail and whether the firm is amenable to providing up to 10 hours at no cost focused on transition matters.
Absolutely. I think that's part of what we offer as a regular part of our package whenever we're trying to, we're meeting with a new client and looking at possibly transitioning into being their labor counsel, because there is a lot of transition that needs to take place. And so I think it's important. We need to meet all of your players. You need to meet us. It makes sense for a while for all three of us to maybe come to some meetings. You don't need to pay for all three of us. It's better for us to get all the information up front and to be there. You only have to pay for one attorney. So there's the 10 hours free. We would also have some meet and greet and some informational meetings where the three of us would be present, either in person or a combination of in person and Zoom, but share all the information with all three of us once, as opposed to having to repeat yourself later when Brett comes to handle a matter or Ian handles a matter, but I was already, here for something else that overlaps with it. So it's very important to us that we have all the information from you. And so we want to make that as accessible as possible and not a financial burden. So that's part of our plan. I do believe it's in the RFP, so we would do that. We would have a period of time where we would be working on matters collectively to make sure that we're up to speed as you transition, and then absolutely the 10 hours at no cost. And it's important for us that you have a seamless transition as well, because that's important for all of us, really, and for the students. And as you transition in the summer and you get ready to start a new school year, you don't need unnecessary problems cropping up for either yourselves or for your administrators. So.
Right, so at this point.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much for having us, too. It's really a pleasure to be here, and thank you for your questions. I just can I clarify one thing? Because you had a list of things in the RFP of what you were looking for in terms of labor counsel, and I didn't know it said there was student matters in there, but is this excludes special education, or does it include special education?
It excludes special education.
Okay. We do handle that as well in terms of cost saving. I'm not saying we would do it, but we can recognize issues and be aware of that. So if you're doing a student discipline issue and the student, you need to ask, is the student on a 504? Is the student on an IEP, right? So you don't go down one track and then find out that you missed a manifestation determination meeting, or that the teacher or parent had been asking for testing and we hadn't gotten around to it yet. And so we should have done it. So you don't need to use us for that, and that's a very common model, but I do think that's a benefit that we bring in being able to recognize and understand the issues that go along with special education. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this point, unless it is a firm-specific question, I'll ask if there are any other questions that then the same question needs to be asked to each firm. Mr. Sheehan.
So, as we prepare to transition from state receivership to local control, what legal structures, governance policies, and delegation protocols should the school committee and superintendent put in place to ensure compliance, accountability, and a sustainable exercise of local authority without risking reintervention by the state?
You saved the big question for last. Look at that. Well, I think a big thing that would be important for you to have in terms of policies and protocols in place is understanding who's making what decision, and who's responsible for whether it's, teacher education, accountability, evaluation, training, policy review. So I did see on your website that you are in the process of doing a lot of policy review. I think that's really important so that you all understand what, you're supposed to be doing under your policies. But then if something is outdated and doesn't make sense, given your situation or the passage of time, that you're updating those to make sure that the right person is responsible for the right decision. And I think that will go a long way in terms of holding yourselves accountable and holding others in the district accountable as well. I think good communication will be extremely important. That can be a little hard given, the open meeting requirements sometimes for you to have all the conversations that you might want to have, but I think it's important that you do have that. You're going to be looking for a new superintendent soon, so I think having a committee that is focused on that and gets training on what to look for in terms of superintendent search will be very important. Does anyone else have it? I don't mean to take over the whole. Could you repeat just one of the last part you were asking for?
So, accountability, sustainable exercise of local authority without risking reintervention by the state.
Yeah, I think it will be making sure that you have the appropriate either assistant superintendents or chiefs in place that are responsible for, like I said, it's teacher development, teacher accountability, and evaluation. You want to make sure that you're going through that process so that you're holding everyone to the same standards, because that's what you've worked so hard to get to, right? You're having set standards across the district, you're training teachers, you're training your principals and department heads to have set standards, so you want to maintain those. So you need someone who's going to be responsible for holding those people accountable. So if that's the superintendent, then delegating to someone else in his or her cabinet, depending on, as superintendents evolve, then you want to make sure that you do that. And I think that will be really, that's the best way to kind of, I think, keep you all going on the positive track that you're trending towards already.
Ms. Lefebvre.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Okay, so we talked a lot about policies and a lot about the governance, bargaining. So as we see what's happening in the Commonwealth and across the country, and as what we're seeing what's happening in LA, we can't keep immigration and pretend like it's not happening. And it's even happening to our very own students. Mm-hmm. So in regards to policies that not only protect our students, but also protect the districts, have you worked on any such with any districts? What are your recommendations? At the end of the day, we're here for our students, and we got to make sure that we protect them.
Okay. Well, we have worked with our clients, and we've done a lot in terms of with the AG's guidance and the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's guidance, and making sure that they know exactly what's there and that they're getting those resources out to teachers and principals and building heads so that they have protocols in place. If ICE, for instance, was to show up at a building, that they all know what they're supposed to do, who they're supposed to refer people to. And I know there's new guidance that has come out and has been recently reissued. So making sure that everyone is up to date on that. I also know that there's a number of communities that the school districts and either the city or town are partnering, because either the board of selectmen or the city council wants to put something in place on a community-wide, that I think it's very important that they consult with schools and make sure that they're understanding the impacts and how that's going to work with schools. So that piece I haven't been as directly involved in, but I know a lot of clients are collaborating with, in your case, it would be the city council, to make sure that you have things in place, how the police department may or may not respond, what's going to go on. Police departments have some questions and concerns as well, so there is a collaboration that needs to happen here. So it is schools, and it's a big it's a big piece of schools, but I think as a city overall, it's important. So like a joint task force type of thing that would be really helpful to make sure everyone's operating on the same page and that you're taking, the steps you need to take to keep the citizens and the students safe, but also your community at large.
And I've had some experience, working with school districts on their policies in terms of what were to happen if an ICE officer would show up at the school door, say for what happens if there's an ICE agent waiting at the bus stop. And I mean, as Melissa said, I mean it's difficult in that some of the the local police departments, they don't know what's going on, nor does a lot of the community. And you see those news stories, and I think it's important to have a reassuring message to your students, your families, and your constituents. And certainly we can help you with that in terms of a policy and knowing what's kind of within the bounds of their authority and what isn't. And I think that goes a long way to keeping everyone informed, because I think that's the most difficult thing is kind of people are uncertain, and that uncertainty certainly creates fear and anxiety. So
I don't know if this would be a policy or not, but I mean, something we can do is just share experiences from other clients or communities that we work with too. And I know that in one community they were seeing that families weren't showing up. This particular community happened to offer different the free food truck, or they would do community outreach where you could come during to certain schools at certain days to drop in to get clothing or food, and they were seeing a huge decrease of people showing up, right? And so then what other mode of reaching these individuals who need the food and are coming because they have a reason to come? So working with your community engagement and outreach, so sharing stories among clients and what other people are seeing to either alert you to a trend or something that you maybe haven't thought about, or some people, have seen, but they're not sure what to do about it. And so sharing ideas, again, that's not the legal piece, but it is part of what we do because we form relationships with clients. And so you're having conversations and talking about what's going on in the world and how it impacts each of us and in the different communities. So that's certainly something that a client has mentioned to me as something, and they're trying to figure out now, how do we reach these individuals and how do we help them feel safe accessing the resources that we can and do want to provide. So that's a big one. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us. If you have any other questions at some point and you are able to access, please feel free to reach out, and happy to provide any other information that you might need as you make your decision. So
thank you all very much. It was a pleasure meeting
it's
you
very
all.
nice
much.
speaking
Nice
with
meeting
all of
you.
you. Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
You have two good firms to choose from.
Thank you so much for being here. I will ask that each member introduces themselves relatively quickly so that then we can move on to our 6 prepared questions.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you all for having us. We're pleased to have the opportunity to interview with you. My name is Mark Terry. I'm the leader of the Education Law Practice Group at MyRic. And I had planned, in our proposal, we had a third person with us, Sharon Siegel. Fortunately, Sharon had some significant car trouble at the end of the day yesterday and wasn't able to find alternate transportation for today. But she would be another senior attorney. She's been practicing as long as I have been. And with me is Jamie Martinez. Jamie is relatively fresh out of law school, but would be a part of our team in supporting Holyoke if we're chosen. So I wanted to have her at least be present. I'll probably be answering most of the questions, but I wanted her to have an opportunity to meet with you to meet with her. Want to introduce yourself, Jamie? You got to push the green button.
Hi, everyone. Oh, perfect. Awesome. Yes, like Mark said, my name is Jamie Martinez. I'm very grateful to be here today. I joined MyRic about a year ago, and I've been assisting mainly Mark on our school clients, and we're very happy to be here and have the shot.
Thank you so much. Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you. Welcome. My name is Devin Sheehan. I'm an at-large member of the Holyoke School Committee, first elected in 2010, and I've served on the Holyoke Committee or the Greater Commonwealth Virtual School Committee until now. So what experience do you have representing public school committees or public school districts, particularly here in Massachusetts? Please describe your familiarity with Massachusetts education laws, school governance, and any relevant cases or matters you've handled.
Sure. And thank you again for the opportunity to be here. Yeah. I forget how sensitive these can be. Is that better? I've been practicing since 1996. I've been with MyRic since 1999, and really have taken charge of growing the school law practice since that time. Thank you. So I've been, as I said, I've been with the firm since 1999. Been practicing really in the area of municipal and school law since that time, and really have tried to build our practice as a firm focused on school law. And within the context of the firm, we certainly have a very broad firm. It's one of the things that differentiates us from others is that we're 75 attorneys, and we have really a lot of people with a lot of depth of knowledge that allows us to do things probably a little bit more efficiently than some other firms. We have people who do a lot of work with nonprofits, as an example. So when things come up in terms of with the education foundations and more like that, we've got people that are experts in that. We have people that are bankruptcy that every now and then we've had a bus company go bankrupt. So that, we have a pretty wide range of expertise within the firm, and really our practice is everything school law related, except for special education law. That's just one thing that we have never tried to focus on. We've had a few people do it from time to time, but we do not hold ourselves out in that area. And my understanding is you do have another firm that does your special education work, and I'm familiar with them and have worked with them in other districts as well.
So
Ms.
hi,
Wilson.
I'm Ellie Wilson. I am the Ward 7 representative and actually a former teacher here in our district. So how do you approach advising school committees on matters where legal, political, and community considerations intersect? And can you share an example of how you helped a school committee navigate a complex or high-profile issue?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of cases that's kind of the heart of the role, right, is to be able to take the law that we've learned through experience and training, but apply it. And I have this little sort of calendar, 1 page a day calendar quote that I keep on my wall, which is, I don't know that I want an attorney to tell me what I can't do. I want to have them tell me how I can do what I want to do. And I really try to take that approach. It's a Dale Carnegie, a J.P. Morgan, I think maybe. But I love that quote because I think it really summarizes what our responsibility is. You don't need somebody to come and tell you, the open meeting law says this, as an example. Most clients need help with the situation. And I think that starts by legal knowledge, experience, excuse me, but at the same time really is about understanding your community, and understanding how things work in any particular given community, because they're not all the same. You know, I'm going to take a guess. We do a lot of work up in Amherst, and it's a very different community than what Holyoke is. And so, you know, as example, using that, there's very public outcry there a couple of years ago around some Title IX issues, concerns about some employees, and I'm not sharing anything that wasn't in the papers, right? So,
Right.
right. So you know, right?
Yes.
And you know, we were intimately involved in the process that went through, step by step, meeting with the school committee, as well as the superintendent at the time and others, but really making sure that each step of the way, it's not just about making sure that the law is adhered to, that individual rights are respected, but also understanding and trying to provide guidance in terms of how we can communicate with the community, what we can communicate with the community, and you know, hopefully we're kind of coming out of the tail end of that in a successful way. You know, at the end of the day, so far, all the disputes that came out of that have landed in a good place for the school district.
Thank you.
All right. So we're not a very wealthy district. So the next question is, what cost savings measures do you offer or recommend to help school committees manage legal expenses without compromising the quality of services? Provide examples such as preventative training, policy review strategies, or billing models that reduce unnecessary costs.
Yeah, sure. So I think the biggest part is, you know, it'd start with efficiency. You know, I'm sure you've got a proposal, you know what our hourly rate is. I'm sure, you know, the other firm is giving you that same information. I think efficiency, you know, really is the most important part, right? Because two firms can charge you the same rate, and one might take longer to do the work, right? So the rate isn't always the answer to the question. And that kind of ties back to what I said before about the depth of our firm. You know, as a firm with 75 different attorneys in different practice areas, we have the ability to provide service in a more efficient manner than some others, or we do everything for clients where they might need to go somewhere else and have higher rates. I've got a colleague who's handled litigation where a school district was alleged not to have had water that was safe. It was, to be clear, and it met EPA standards, but this person wanted the water to be the same level as the bottled water, like on Mr. Sheehan's desk. Another case, PFAS litigation around athletic fields, and handled those kind of things. Those are things we have in house, and we can do from experience, rather than having, you know, perhaps a smaller firm where there's a litigator, general litigator, maybe not as specialized. The training, I think, is another huge one. I'm a big believer in providing training. I do training off the clock, you know, and I've never had a client try to take advantage of that. If, you know, somebody said, "Oh, you can come every week or something," I probably would have to say, you know, that's not working for us. But I do that, and I look, honestly, I encourage clients to take advantage of it, because I think it's an ounce of prevention, and I would rather work with you in terms of trying to avoid costs than set you up in a situation where you're going to be incurring costs. And I think that is a part of the approach we take. I try to give very practical advice to people, give advice that allows for consideration of options, right? It's not my decision of what you do in a particular circumstance. I look at my role as to give you options and consequences and pluses and minuses and help you make the decision that really is best for you. And I think by doing that, we're able to make sure that you're at least informed as to the costs, right? Legal services do cost money, but we do the preventative stuff as best we can. We offer the training. Like I said, I don't really put any firm limits on that. Like I said, and I've never had somebody take advantage of it. I think doing that, like with administrator retreats, is probably the most valuable place for it. With building principals, with superintendent, central office staff, and there are a number of programs we've done around employee investigations. In particular, that tends to be a very popular one. Imposing discipline appropriately, process. Honestly, I don't know that I've ever had a client that got it all right all the time, right? And so this is trying to keep your costs down by not stepping in something by accident. And then the last thing I'll just mention quickly is we also do put out, we call them internally e-blasts, but we try to put out informational updates digitally. If you might already be on our list, to be honest with you, because we do pick up names here and there. But certainly if you retained us, we would make sure everybody's name is on that. You can see those updates, and we do those as necessary. You know, it really depends on what's going on. Sometimes there'll be months without one, but more often than not, there are several a year that kind of outline something that is actionable, and we try to keep them actionable so that you're informed of what's going on before it becomes a problem for you, before, you know, it's learn on some other district's circumstances.
Thank you. Mr. Willihan.
Thank you. I appreciate you showing up. My name is John Wellhen, and I'm the Ward 5 school member. Just back to training, this question, you might have covered some of the questions just recently. How would you approach educating and advising newly elected school members on their legal responsibilities and their roles? Would you provide training such as written resources to support this process?
Yeah, I have done a number of trainings for new board members, you know, that kind of focus on some of the basics, open meeting law, state ethics law, public records. You know, those things tend to sort of come to you in some fashion. Public records here and there depends on the client. I'm certainly happy to do that kind of training again, sort of as an off-the-clock training for people, and you know, would arrange that, I think, with new people. Some of those, you know, if you're only turning over a couple of members a year, might be a Zoom thing, you know, that we would do it that way, and something that's more efficient for you. The one thing I'll offer to you, because it might sort of be helpful too, is I don't know if this is in my materials or not, but I've been on school committee myself for the last decade, going on 11 years now. And I think a lot of things that I can offer you are somewhat experience-based, right? I feel like I've become a better lawyer because I was a school committee member, and I've been a better school committee member because I've been a lawyer. You know, and I think that ties into some of the things I said in response to your question about sort of understanding what it really means to be sitting in the seats you're all sitting in. And I would hope that I can share some of that, as I'm sure you all share with each other as new people come on, but embed that into sort of the advice and what's real practical and what do you kind of need to know to start, and how do you start with an idea of just being comfortable with what you don't know, right? Because when you come into this role, and I say for myself, I remember the first year, I'm like, I thought I would know all of this stuff, and you know, it wasn't that way, because it wasn't all the law stuff that I did know. So, you know, like I said, I would be more than happy to really focus a training on anything. We've done a number of them over the years, focusing on those topics that are really a part of being a school committee member, and you know, sort of focusing on understanding your role. Obviously, your roles are a little bit different here right now with the Commonwealth's involvement, but as that transitions going forward, that might be something that, you know, a number of members would benefit from.
Ms. Lefebvre?
Good evening, and thank you for being here. I am the other at-large representative for the school committee, Mildred Lefebvre, sorry. What is your experience advising school committees on collective bargaining with educators and staff unions? And how would you support the committee in understanding its legal roles in negotiations, especially as it prepares to re-engage in bargaining responsibilities previously managed under receivership?
Sure. So collective bargaining is kind of the core of what I've been doing for my career. I started, first couple of years I was on the union side and did some of it on that side as well. But I've been doing that. That's probably what I spend the most of my time on, you know, collective bargaining. I'm out with a client, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, most weeks at certainly this time of the year. And so I don't even try to quantify the number of contracts I've negotiated. I'm probably doing about 12 or 14 this cycle, you know, that are open either on July 1 or September 1. And so I could talk in more detail about little things here and there if you like. So in terms of, you know, sort of the training part, and I'm a big believer in just laying it out for people. I think if you're all getting comfortable with collective bargaining and having a new role in that going forward, you know, the first thing I do is probably come and meet with you in an executive session before you start into the process, right? So I know you're in collective bargaining now, I think, and I guess that's going to wrap up. But going forward, if we were starting a negotiation that the committee's going to have a role in, I'd want to come out and talk with you about how bargaining works, what that team might look like. Are you going to defer that to the superintendent receiver, or are you going to have a subcommittee? Who's going to be on your team? Is council going to be on the table? Talk through all that thing, talk with you about what's going on out there right now in terms of different strategies that the Mass Teachers Association in particular have been using, trying to bargain multiple units at once or not, and really try to just have a conversation with you about what that all looks like and talk about what your role is, right? As under Chapter 150E, again, I know things are a little different at the moment, school committee is the bargaining authority, right? So you have the decision-making authority. You have the authority to set parameters of what your bargaining team is going to try to negotiate. And we'd get into all of that. You know, I'm not looking to try to do a whole lesson on it here, but you know, I think that's important. There's some clients I've negotiated with many times over, and I know they know what they're doing, and then they just go do it. But they're still clients that are not new to us, where I go out before we get started and say, let's have a conversation about what you want to accomplish, what this process looks like, how you want to do it. And I think there's a lot of value in just having that conversation, because people who are new to the process, which is most school committee members, right? Though that's an opportunity to learn and to understand your roles better. I'm going to be part of the collective bargaining boot camp that the MASC is doing over the summer in July. And I love doing that stuff. You know, it's kind of all part of it.
Thank you. Mr. Isasa.
Thank you for being here. My name is Orlando Isasa, and I am an appointed member of the committee to represent Ward 4. The committee's goal is to support a seamless transition between attorneys while minimizing costs associated with the transition. Please describe your firm's transition plan in detail and whether the firm is amenable to providing up to 10 hours at no cost focus on the transition matters.
I'll answer probably the most pointed part of that question, right? Yes, in terms of the time. And I'll, look, for us, you know, when we take on a school committee client, we tend to work with them for decades. So we're not looking at nickels and dimes on the front end. You know, if it were 15, 20 hours to get all that kind of uploaded into our brain, so you're not sort of paying for us to learn something that somebody else did, that's fine. I am not at all concerned about, you know, putting in some free time for the school committee and school district to just get everybody sort of comfortable with where we are. My process generally when transitioning into a new client is I want to come and sit down with some key players. I want to sit down with the superintendent, often the business manager, chair of the school committee, or a representative or two of the school committee. I want to understand sort of what your hot topics are, you know, and what's really going on. There are two layers to that too. One is understanding it atmospherically and sort of the community type question. And the other part is really like, are we on any hard deadlines? You know, something due on July 4th, July 3rd, you know, whatever day it is, and you've retained us 2 days earlier. We need to know those deadlines really quickly to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. The other thing that I've done with some clients, and this isn't necessarily just coming onto a new client, but sometimes a transition of superintendents, I will schedule a weekly call with them and just say, let's schedule something that's going to be a standing call and do one with the one client at 2 o'clock Friday afternoon. And we have it on the books for every week. And sometimes it doesn't happen for their scheduling reasons or mine, but we do that to have sort of the ongoing dialogue of the things that come up day to day that may not need an urgent response, but is a dedicated time that we know we set aside to kind of work through things that have come up, things that we're concerned about, and make sure that, you know, we're looking a little bit down the road in terms of, okay, what are the things that we've been kind of percolated up over a period of time. I always think of great summer projects, right? Summer's a little bit quieter. It's a great time to kind of look at some of your cornerstone documents that you haven't looked at before and have them ready to go for the fall. So, you know, our plan really would be to kind of come out here off the clock again, sit with some key players, understand, you know, what your perspective is on what's going on, what you're most worried about from a legal perspective, where you feel like your gaps are, you know, in terms of what your knowledge or understanding are, and kind of lay out a plan really from there. I wouldn't, even presume to sort of know those issues enough to give you specifics. But there are a lot of things that I want to see early on in process, like, what do you have a standard process for disciplinary actions of employees, right? Or if you're going to have us doing stuff with student discipline, which I know you may use your other firm for, I want to see what those processes are. I want to see what handbooks, or look at your collective bargaining agreements, just for familiarity, and to see if there are things that have been struggles along the way. Let's think about what the plan is going to be in the long term to address those kind of concerns, and where do we have an ability to avoid problems just by cleaning up documents quickly, if that's necessary.
Mr. Sheehan.
So I think there's 2 extra questions.
Bonus round.
So as we prepare to transition from state receivership to local control, what legal structures, governance policies, and delegation protocols should the school committee and superintendent put in place to ensure compliance, accountability, and sustainable exercise of local authority without risking reintervention by the state? And I can repeat that again if you need it when I say it, because I know it's not printed. That was something.
So I think the gist of it is, what do we put in place to make sure the state doesn't come back in? The gist of it. Yeah.
And I would say the overall, as we talk about the governance policies and structure that the district has to look towards, we transition on July 1.
Yeah, and so I did take a look at some of the documents that DESE has put out there in terms of the current turnaround plans, the sort of representations, and I think it's an insurance, if I'm saying the right term there. I looked at some of that material to see kind of what they're looking at, and some of the things that are sort of prioritized still for future work. I think from my perspective, the things they're concerned about are first and foremost on that list, right? We want to make sure that every single thing that they have raised concerns about are things that we prioritize to have in place. I don't know that I can tell you off the top of my head like which policies are important. I suspect you probably use the MASC model like most school districts do, and that includes, in my opinion, probably way more than it needs to at times. That covers the basis. What it really comes down to me is making sure we understand what those are, and that we have some familiarity with them. And then looking at, I'm sure, I won't pretend to sort of know all the work that you guys have had to do with the Commonwealth over the last several years. You're going to understand better than I am, quite frankly, where their tension points have been, the things you've worked on. And, from my perspective, it's a matter of sort of saying, okay, it's not about the policies necessarily, it's about commitment to policies. And I think it's about providing the support so people understand what the law calls for, right? You've been operating under a different framework, and the structures around the authority of a superintendent, the authority of building principals, the authority of school committee, making sure we all understand those. I'm not sure it's a policy issue. It is as much as it is maybe an understanding issue. And again, I don't want to presume to know what you all know and what you don't. But I see those issues in every school district I work with, where the principals sometimes say, oh, that's the superintendent's job. The superintendent, no, it's the principal's job. And, and then the school committee thinks everything's their job, and understanding where those lines are and being able to talk about that, and provide clean backup so you all understand that stuff. That's where my head would go, Mr. Sheehan.
It's a good thing you wrote yours down. I didn't. But it's basically the same thing. Stop. So the city of Holyoke is a very diverse community, right? And as we see what's happening, we've talked a lot about collective bargaining, litigation, school governance, but we see what's happened within the Commonwealth. We're seeing what's happening right now in LA. So immigration should not be something that we forget about. What have you worked with any school committees in regards to policy development related to immigration and protecting our students, but as well as protecting ourselves as a district?
Yeah, and I would say that I haven't necessarily suggested to clients they adopt policy on that. I've provided guidance to them that I think largely is consistent with what you've seen from the Commonwealth, which focuses on understanding what ICE can do and what it can't do. And certainly been involved in advising a number of clients. You've seen our client list. There are other communities we work with that I think have similar demographics. I'm thinking of Fitchburg in particular, where these concerns have been live. You know, we heard, you know, this is even going back a few months. We heard that ICE was in the neighborhood kind of thing, and we want to make sure. And so, you know, what I've set up more is protocols with them. One of the things I said to them is like, look, I need to know, like in the granular level, I need to know if I'm getting a call from one of your building principals and I don't have their cell phone in my phone. So that if I get a call from Principal X, I know they're calling about something really important, right? Because otherwise it's going to go to the superintendent first, and then it'll come to me. And so, you know, that's a procedural aspect, but I also try to really make sure they understand, like, look, you can't be a hero. And this is what I've said to a lot of people on that second part. It's like, how do you not get yourself in trouble? In fact, emailing with a client earlier today. And I think that really starts with, again, understanding what you can do and what you can't, right? If somebody with a badge and a gun pushes somebody, a staff member, out of the way to get into one of your buildings, attacking that person who's got the badge and the gun is probably not the right thing to do, right? Now, fortunately, I don't really think much of that's going to happen because, quite frankly, we've seen all the efforts around the Commonwealth, around the country. They're able to find people that they're targeting in a lot less secure places than schools, which are locked, right? So we need to make sure our staff understand nobody gets in unless they follow our normal protocols. Our doors are locked. Why do they have to be there? They need to check in. We established a procedure where any warrant, they understand the difference between an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant. And one of them is more or less garbage, and the other one we have to pay attention to. Apparently, it's, you know, so just for, you know, for the record, doesn't have the same weight legally. And, yeah, making sure that people understand that difference, understand that no individual should make that call on their own. The procedures pushing out is like, okay, you're a teacher, you're a building administrator. What do you do with that? Like, tell them, thank you, please wait. We're going to pass it up to the superintendent. We're going to get our legal counsel on the phone. We're going to have somebody look at it, make sure it's authentic, make sure it checks all the boxes that it is the judicial warrant and not the other one. And then at the end of the day, if it's valid because a judge said so, I'm not going to have a client get in the middle of that, you know, and I personally, it's a hard thing to say, right? Because you know how that's going to play out in somebody's life. But at the same time, I don't want any of my clients getting arrested for interfering with some other legitimate law enforcement purpose, whether it's this or anything else. And so I think the second half of your question about how do we do it in a way that is protective is communicate expectations and communicate what you can do, understand what you can do, let your community know what that is and what it isn't. And I think I've seen a number of superintendents, and I think it's mostly superintendents who've done this, write up fairly nice, concise statements along those lines that really try to provide assurance to the community that we're not giving up anybody, right? We're not turning over student records. We're not going to call somebody and say, hey, I think this student or this person is not here legally. You know, we're not going to do that. And I think that's perfectly fine. You have no obligation to do that. And I think as a policy, you could adopt that as a school committee. But generally, I think it's a procedural issue, making sure people know what the bounds are of what ICE can do and what it can't.
Right. Thank you so much for coming and
Yeah,
for
thank you
giving
all
us
for
your
having us.
time.
Yeah, thank you all, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Do I have a motion to adjourn this
Can we
meeting?
make a motion to adjourn?
Seconded by Mr. Sheehan. Do we still have Mayor Garcia on Zoom? Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Thank you, everybody. We will be right back for our regular scheduled meeting.